In what may be one of the most bold declarations we've seen by a president in a long time, or a psychotic gaffe, Joe Biden has vowed that U.S. would intervene with military to defend Taiwan should China invade. Now, this is a bold statement by a president, assuming he has the cognitive faculties to make such a clear-minded claim. He is effectively breaking with long-standing U.S. policy that we acknowledge China's claim over Taiwan, but keep things a bit ambiguous. We do provide military support in the sense of, funding and things like that, but not necessarily to directly intervene with U.S. forces. Now, China is not too happy with the U.S. basically saying that we would intervene to stop them because they view Taiwan as a part of China. Joe Biden saying this is either him saying, you know what, we're going to stand up to China and tell them no. Considering the White House is already walking back his claim, I'm going to go with this was a psychotic gaffe. And what I mean by psychotic is I don't mean that Joe Biden is psychotic. I mean that it's a gaffe so disastrous that anyone who would allow this man to speak publicly on these matters is psychotic. I don't know if this means World War III, but that's what's trending on Twitter. People are saying, are we going to have World War III now? Because look, the issue with Taiwan and China is not the same as Ukraine and Russia. Similar in many ways, perhaps potentially worse. We're dealing with a Chinese Communist Party that is putting pressure on so many different countries like Vietnam, for instance, and Japan, South Korea. They're making claims to the South China Sea, and the U.S. is sending strike groups, aircraft carriers, in the area. Plus, there's something called the Quad, which is an agreement essentially between four different nations. I think it's Australia, Japan, the U.S., and India. I could be wrong about that. We can pull that up. But basically, Australia and the U.S. are growing concerned about the expansive Chinese military presence in the Pacific Ocean. There is a real fear that World War III could start, and Taiwan has a lot to do with it. In the past, we saw that the U.S. government was shifting the purchasing of missiles from desert warfare to ocean theater, as some call it. Basically, the U.S. is getting ready for some kind of naval battle, at least based on what they're purchasing. Now, this could be misdirection. It could be saber rattling, or it could just be run-of-the-mill orders where they're like, well, that's what makes the most sense, right? We're not going to go to war in the Middle East. We're pulling our troops out. Probably should shore up our naval forces. Now, at a time when war is breaking out in Eastern Europe, when there is a real fear of a nuclear war with Russia, the last thing we need is an absent-minded president who can't think straight. And all of this is happening amid conversations about civil war, World War III, food shortages, fuel shortages, and yes, it's Joe Biden. Civil war is in the conversation because of something retruthed by Donald Trump. That's like retweeted, but on Truth Social. Someone said civil war, and now the media's lost their mind over it. I did a segment on it earlier. You may hear it in a little bit. But the argument here is, if there are people who would blindly march behind Joe Biden, even at his worst, then we are hopeless, because either he stumbles us into World War III or a civil war. Perhaps he is our Buchanan, a feckless and weak president who has no grasp of foreign or domestic issues. There are many people already posting memes saying the president is not at fault for gas prices. He is. I mean, he is. He's not at fault for literally every circumstance around the world, but at a certain point, the president sets policy. And it's now causing a food shortage, a fuel shortage. This is destabilizing the U.S. So you know what? We'll take a step back. Maybe it's all intentional. I don't know. Maybe it's all on purpose. The reality is that if the U.S. completely destabilizes and erupts into internal conflict, there wouldn't be a war with China now, would there? The U.S. would not be able to intervene with the military to defend Taiwan if it's too busy fighting itself. Maybe that's ultimately the goal of China. Perhaps that's why they exacerbate culture war tensions. But let's read this first story before we get started. Head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support our work. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, Monday through Thursday. At 11 p.m., you'll be supporting our journalists. We're trying to hire a couple more. We've been hiring some column writers as well as new journalists. And you're also supporting infrastructure because we use Rumble infrastructure, which is an alternative in the market to big tech, Silicon Valley, etc. Supporting that means we can create an alternate ecosystem away from all of these big Silicon Valley tech oligarchs. And that competition, at the very least, will put pressure on them and say, we can leave if we want to. If you want to support businesses who are doing that, go to timcast.com, sign up. But don't forget to also smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Let's read the story from the Associated Press. They report, President Joe Biden said Monday the U.S. would intervene militarily if China were to invade Taiwan, declaring the commitment to protect the island is even stronger after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It was one of the most forceful presidential statements in support of Taiwan self-governing in decades. Biden at a news conference in Tokyo said yes, when asked if he was willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if China invaded. That's the commitment we made, he added. The U.S. traditionally has avoided making such an explicit security guarantee to Taiwan, with which it no longer has a mutual defense treaty. Instead, maintaining a policy of strategic ambiguity about how far it would be willing to go. The 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, which has governed U.S. relations with the island, does not require the U.S. to step in militarily if China invades, but makes it American policy to ensure Taiwan has the resources to defend itself and to prevent any unilateral change of status by Beijing. A White House official said Biden's comments did not reflect a policy shift for the United States. However, his words drew a sharp response from mainland China, which has claimed Taiwan to be a rogue province. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin expressed strong dissatisfaction and resolute opposition to Biden's comments. China has no room for compromise or concessions on issues involving China's core interests, such as sovereignty and territorial integrity. He added, China will take firm action to safeguard its sovereignty and security interests, and we will do what we say. Speaking alongside Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, Biden said any effort by China to use force against Taiwan would just not be appropriate, adding that it would dislocate the entire region and be another action similar to what happened in Ukraine. Now hold on there a minute. I like this story here from The Guardian. Biden's Taiwan vow creates confusion, not clarity, and raises China tensions. Okay, let's pause for a second. Is this a forceful statement from a president, or is this a misstatement? I don't know. Because while the AP says it's the most forceful statement from a U.S. president, it was one of the most forceful statements from a president in Taiwan self-governing in decades, or, according to Bloomberg, Biden misspeaks on Taiwan, says U.S. military would intervene. Oh, Jennifer Jacobs, he misspoke. I did not realize. Yo, we're doomed. I don't know if, when I say we're doomed, I don't mean like it's going to be the end of all human life or anything like that. I'm not saying a meteor is going to slam into the earth and wipe out life as we know it. I'm just saying there probably won't be a war with China because this country, the United States, is becoming just a parody of its former self in so many ways. Which is it? Bloomberg, did Biden misspeak, or AP? Did Biden issue a forceful statement? It's remarkable how this story, both are opinions. They're both opinions, not facts. Fact. Joe Biden said the U.S. military would intervene, abandoning the long-standing one China policy, making a firm statement. That's all that happened. But the dude is so whacked out of his mind that Bloomberg assumes he must have misspoken. I don't even know what to say to this. Is this where we are? Is this how we have to entertain global, geopolitics? That the president can say something and we don't know if he's being forceful or stupid. The fact that the U.S. had to walk this back says to me, in all likelihood, Joe Biden gaffed. And his gaffe is stumbling us into major conflict. From Timcast.com. White House rushes. They say Biden says U.S. would militarily intervene to defend Taiwan. White House rushes to walk it back. Who am I supposed to trust? A White House official or Biden himself? Timcast.com reports the U.S. does not currently have a mutual defense treaty with Taiwan. The 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, which has governed U.S. relations with the island, does not require the U.S. to step in militarily to defend Taiwan if China invades, but makes it American policy to ensure Taiwan has the resources to defend itself and prevent any unilateral changes. So we read this a moment ago. CNN's John Berman noted during Monday's episode of New Day that the U.S. generally has a policy of strategic ambiguity. The comments this morning seem a little less ambiguous, Berman said. As to whether they were strategic, CNN has learned the president's comments caught his top aides off guard. They are already issuing some clarifications this morning. Beijing issued a response a short time ago as well. The network's White House reporter Kevin Liptak says, after Biden says yes to the U.S. willing to be involved militarily, a White House official says, quote, as the president said, our policy has not changed. He reiterated our one China policy and our commitment to peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. He also reiterated our commitment under the Taiwan Relations Act to provide Taiwan with the military means to defend itself. China will take, actions. We saw this. The situation appeared very similar to a pair of incidents in March where Biden appeared to call for regime change in Russia and appeared to announce that troops were being sent to Ukraine, only to have his comments quickly walked back by the White House. Heavens. We actually saw this story on March 26th. Biden calls for regime change in Russia, then White House claims he didn't mean what he said again. I'm losing it, yo. I am ready to snap. I am ready to slap this microphone. If the president can't say something without some random unnamed individual coming out and being like, nope, then is he really leading us at all? The man has no ideas. Everything seems to be falling apart. Well, here's what I can tell you from Politico. U.S. quietly urging Taiwan to follow Ukraine playbook for countering China. Yet Beijing is also learning lessons from Russia's botched invasion from May 19th. So it would seem the U.S. very much does want Taiwan to remain independent. One of the biggest fears is that Taiwan is where all of our silicon computer chips are being made. The U.S. is desperately trying to launch manufacturing plants here in the continental United States so that we can supply ourselves with computer chips in the event Taiwan does fall. But it seems like we are concerned about it. Here's what I think happened. I think the problem of Joe Biden is that he is just mentally deficient. He's an old man who can't think straight. I think the U.S. will get involved militarily if China invades Taiwan. But I think they just don't want to blurt it out loud. Not that I think it matters. Think about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, right? We're on the verge of nuclear war. Vladimir Putin is supposedly dying. I mean, maybe, maybe not. But here's a man with a stockpile of nukes who does not want to see NATO and Western forces expand in the region. If he really is dying, I mean, then he's a madman with nuclear bombs. Like, he's on the way out and he's like, I ain't going to let it happen. Would he fire a nuke? I believe it's possible. I don't think he's going to nuke New York or D.C. No, I think, I had a conversation with Jeremy Boring of the Daily Wire, and it seems like there's a possibility of a smaller yield, maybe 100 kiloton bomb as a strategic strike on Ukrainian forces to destabilize the country and then sweep in, cause mass abandonment and things like that. The U.S., with Joe Biden, unable to properly address the ongoing crises, unable to accurately provide messaging. It really does seem like everything is just slowly unraveling, because the issue isn't just the potential for World War III, the potential for war with China, the potential for war with Russia. It seems like we are inching dangerously close to Pacific warfare. We're actively involved in Eastern European warfare. We've got a food crisis, baby formula being imported. The market has now been dropping substantially, and there's going to be reports of recession or stagflation, which will likely just make the markets worse off, and then maybe everything just goes belly up. I don't know what that means in the long run. Belly up in the sense that I hope you're prepared to be more responsible for your own food consumption and water sourcing. Maybe war breaks out. I think there's a strong possibility that in the event of an actual war, the economy might actually improve. You see, here in the U.S., we've outsourced so much of our manufacturing to places like China that if war were to actually break out with China, there would immediately be insane demand. Now, there's no telling how long it would take to actually build a supply chain. But we don't make our own medicines. We don't make our own masks. So when COVID happened, we were dependent upon China. Let's say we actually go to war with China. I'm not saying it'll be good. The economy will probably get bad. But there will be something interesting happening in that many people in this country will all of a sudden find jobs. There will be a lot more jobs. They'll pay a lot better. The government will be forced to remove restrictions. The economy might actually grow because of it. But let's take a look at what's actually going on with the potential for war. In this story from WION News, leaked video shows Chinese commanders discussing Taiwan invasion plan. There's a real potential for war. Perhaps what will happen is that China is preparing to take some action on Taiwan. We've heard that one thing they've been doing, they've been shoring up their financial defenses, making sure that they won't be as susceptible to financial manipulation the way Russia was, sanctions, as it were, because they may actually be preparing for some very serious warfare. In this story from Barron's, they say, China is telegraphing its military intent. Time to listen. A military exercise in the manner it plans to fight. This was true, a military exercises in the manner it plans to fight. This was true for Russia before the February 24th invasion of Ukraine, true of the U.S. before the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and is true of China today. A missile test range, the People's Liberation Army, is using in Western China demonstrates its combat intentions towards Taiwan. The U.S. should reckon for this and other information on PLA force posture in its military planning. So, right here, instability potential. The possibility that we go to war with Taiwan. Now, Joe Biden said it. Again, I think Joe Biden may actually just be telling the truth, but his brain's so broken he doesn't realize he's not supposed to say it out loud. In the story from the Daily Mail, Putin survived assassination attempt 2 months ago, Ukraine's intelligence chief claims. Kirilo Budanov, the head of the Chief Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine's military defense, said there was an attempt to kill the Russian president. Local media claims Budanov said assassination attempt was 2 months ago. Putin is said to be fearful of an assassination attempt against him since his decision to invade Ukraine. Well, of course that's the case. One of the easiest ways to end a war is to go after their leaders. But what do you think Vladimir Putin would do? What do you think he's going to do now? One thing we've heard is the potential for nuclear war exists only if Russia's existence is threatened. Do you think Vladimir Putin's going to sit back and be like, well, if I die, Russia will be fine? Or do you think Vladimir Putin's going to say something like, if they try to kill me or succeed, Russia will not survive? Best use the most powerful weapons we have. I don't know where it's all heading, man. Can't see the future. Can't issue strong predictions other than here's what may be. I can only say, here's what is happening. And what's happening is that I think Joe Biden as a leader has doomed us in many ways. The Guardian reports, the food crisis is what happens when global chains collapse. We might need to get used to it. Maybe. When speaking about gas prices, Joe Biden said that we're going through an incredible transition. Gas prices reach another record high at $4.60 a gallon after Biden claimed U.S. is going through an incredible transition at the pump. And as White House now plans to tap into emergency diesel reserves. Yeah, they're saying there's going to be a diesel shortage. So let's talk about where we're at. Just real quick, recap. Maybe Civil War, maybe World War III, maybe none of those things. Or maybe we just starve. Maybe there can't be a civil war if everyone's starving. There certainly can be a revolution. It's one of the issues that precipitates one. In which case, maybe it devolves into a civil war. Let me tell you this. If we don't have food, if people can't get food for their babies, and then people in the city are starving, do you think they go to the rural areas and say, oh, Republican brethren, you were right about everything. Please bestow upon us a meal? Or do you think they say, those far-right white supremacists are hoarding all the food and we should take it because we're smarter? In which case, if there's no gas, maybe there's not much good fighting. I mean, people aren't going to want to travel. It's like you could drive in an hour what would take you a day to walk. That means a lot. People may be confined to the areas they're in because they won't have the energy to get out of them, but they do have some gas. How far will they make it? How far will they go? Can there really be a World War III if we're too busy fighting over our gasoline and food amongst ourselves? If that happens, China takes over. Just hands down, China takes over. The U.S. has to airlift in baby formula from Europe. It really does feel like we're already in World War III. I don't know if at this stage of hyperpolarization, the U.S. can withstand this degree of conflict. Because war will mean rising prices. It will mean a strain on resources. And then you're going to have, look, farms are typically run by conservatives in rural areas. What happens when they're just like, we ain't selling the food to you guys anymore? Now, the one thing that can protect us from civil war would just be the fact that supply chain isn't as simple as, we make food and then we sell it to cities. They make food, they sell it to a distribution plant or a processing plant who then has customers, and people want to sell it where the money is. What happens, though, when the farmers say, we need the food for ourselves and our community? What happens when fuel runs out, food production drops, and then they just say, look, we got enough food for our immediate area? What happens when rural folk go to those farms and say, stop wasting fuel transporting this food out. We need the food. Food's everything, man. These people who live in big cities ain't going to be able to grow their own food. They're not. And I've had people say to me, yes, they are. There's a lot of urban garden initiatives. Just hold on there a minute. Listen. Can some people have gardens in cities? Yes. Can some people grow food on rooftops? They sure can. But what you need to understand is the amount of acreage you need per person is substantial, and a city doesn't have it. They don't. Vertical farms, maybe. Maybe you build large hydroponic vertical farms. Okay, that's possible. You going to be able to build those fast enough? I doubt it. If the collapse happens, and I mean like economic breakdown, which is literally happening, the global supply chain is in crisis. They're not going to be able to produce enough food in these cities to sustain them. Density is way too intense in New York. Food has to be shipped in. If diesel goes bye-bye, cities go bye-bye. Let me just say it again, okay, so you can understand. For those who don't. I'm not saying it to be condescending. I'm just saying, let me reiterate to drive the point home. It's a better way to put it. You need fuel for trucks to go into New York to bring the food to these places. If there is no diesel, the first thing that's going to happen is the fuel will be used to actually grow the crops, to drive the machinery. Then once the crops are available, they're not going to make it very far because people are going to say, do I need the fuel for making the food or for sending the food elsewhere? How about this? We restrict how far the food can be shipped, and then we utilize as much fuel as we have left for growing more crops or doing the work we need done. At what point will people have to do physical human labor? At what point will we start strapping a till to the back of an ox and having it till the field for us to save fuel? If there's no diesel, don't be surprised. Beasts of burden will make a big comeback. I don't know. Maybe we're tapping into our strategic diesel reserves. Maybe it's not going to be as bad as some would predict. I don't know. I'm not a seer. But what I can see right now happening is a food shortage, a formula shortage, the U.S. being forced to airlift baby formula. And I see the communists and the socialists saying insane things. Like, we had Hassan. Sorry, Hassan, this one was just totally off. He said something bad about capitalism because 4 companies make all the baby formula. It's like, dude, that is not a problem of capitalism. It's a problem of a resource. When light bulbs were invented, one dude was making light bulbs. Do we go, capitalism is dumb, only one person's making light bulbs? Baby formula is made by a handful of companies, either because power centralizes, which is not, I get it, could be a bad thing, or it's just because there's not enough people making formula. It has nothing to do with the companies. It has to do with how many factories we have and the resources we have. The real problem is this global trade initiative to send our resources off to China. Then we get into a war and we have nothing. I think we're being set up. I shouldn't say this on purpose. I think we are setting up for a major conflict in which the U.S. implodes overnight. China will invade Taiwan. We will have no means to invade because do we have the fuel for our military vehicles if we don't have the fuel for our food? Food comes first. So if we can't wage a war because of no fuel, then what happens? Now, don't get me wrong. China is going to be in a similar position. But they can very easily invade Taiwan with less energy than we would need to defend it because we are further away. We have military bases in the Pacific that I understand. But it's easier because mainland China can focus its resources on taking Taiwan. Mainland US ain't going to be able to reach it. So perhaps it's a good thing. China invades Taiwan. Then we lose access to silicon chips. We aren't making them. We have no fuel. And then the US goes back to a simpler time. Yeah, I worry about people who live in big cities, what they're going to do. The food crisis is coming. Joe Biden is preparing emergency fuel stockpiles. He's going to drain our diesel reserves. Biden recently asked officials to begin preparing a plan to order a release of fuel from the Northeast Home Heating Oil Reserve, NAHOR, a government stockpile of ultra-low sulfur diesel last tapped in 2012 during Hurricane Sandy. The system is definitely under strain, the senior administration official told CNN. We think this looks like the exact circumstance where consideration of the release should be done, and that's what the president has directed. The average price of diesel fuel, which is vital for transportation, construction, and agriculture, skyrocketed to an all-time high of $5.58 a gallon. They say it's a conspiracy theory. They say it's a conspiracy theory that the government is orchestrating this. We are expecting gas prices, not diesel, to hit over $6 by August. In New England, diesel prices have reached $6.43 a gallon on average, exceeded only by prices in California. Joe Biden has taken action, instituted policy, which is causing this. They want to blame Vladimir Putin. That's just not true. Putin, of course, the invasion of Ukraine played a role. We're at war. That's really what's happening. For whatever reason, Joe Biden and Democrats decided to enact a bunch of policies to cripple or slow our oil and fuel production, to put regulations and restrictions on it, to cancel oil and gas leases. Now, the oil and gas leases is a combination of issues. Some say that nobody wants to tap oil in Alaska because it's expensive. Maybe there's not a big enough return, but nowadays with the price of gas, perhaps it's time to start drilling holes in Alaska because we need fuel if we're going to survive. We need to be a net energy exporter if we are going to make sure we have enough energy for ourselves. Otherwise, there's no growth. And if we want to defeat China on the world stage, we need growth. So where does that leave us? Joe Biden, one of the worst presidents I think we've ever had. He can't speak straight. He contradicts his own people. And it's just continually getting worse. And there's a big issue that I didn't even bring up. Texas National Guard troops and Border Patrol stand firm with officials, still expecting a surge in migrants as single males are released into the U.S., even though a judge blocked Biden's bid to end Title 42. All while this is going on, we can expect a surge of illegal immigration straining an already fractured system. While the U.S. government, Democrats mostly, and half the Republicans send billions of dollars overseas. It's shockingly insane. What can you do? I kind of feel like there's nothing to be done at the federal stage. We're watching this happening, and it seems like an addiction, a fracturing, and there's no way to stop it. Dominoes being knocked over. You can take care of yourself, your friend, and your family. You can get out of cities. You can prepare for the worst case scenario. Food will be more expensive. California is preparing for $10 per gallon gasoline or greater. Gas is consistently breaking records. So maybe it all ends now, as I always say, because I can't see the future. I don't want to be fear-mongering. I'll say this. Maybe right now is the last video I make saying things are bad. Tomorrow, the market turns around. Vladimir Putin says, I'm so sorry. Let's go back home. No more war. China says, we were nuts to think we can go to Taiwan. A big oil spring erupts in the middle of America, and they say, we got more energy than we can deal with. Maybe all of those things happen. I just think that's really unlikely. Seems more likely you are going to be put in a position where you will need to prepare for yourselves and be responsible for yourself. And we have a failed president to thank for it. I know COVID was bad. I don't blame Joe Biden for COVID. There's a lot of problems with COVID, a lot of failed policy around it. I can blame Joe Biden for the mistakes he's made as it pertains to their global, climate change crisis and how that's affecting our chances of survival these days. I can blame Biden for his policy. And I can say that under Trump, the economy, the best numbers of our lives. Where was that? I think they don't want it. I think powerful interests did not want people to be consuming more. I think when you look at Donald Trump's efforts on the economy, it was the worst possible thing in the world for the climate change activists. People were consuming more than ever. Growth was up. They didn't like it. They want us to curtail. They want us to go down. They want to stop carbon emissions. And there you have it. Bill Gates talks often about reducing population growth. You think they'd be happy with a good economy? A good economy means more babies. Certainly not. So maybe war is coming because either they want it or they don't care if it happens. But I certainly doubt they're going to try and make your life better when all of these powerful elites, from venture capital to investment to politicians, say too many people and that's a problem. Why would they want you to be able to have more kids? I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.